He helped the alien girl rebuild her cart. Now she brings him tea every morning. The repulsor cart died with a sound like tearing metal, and James Heller watched 200 kilos of cargo slam into Bay 7's deck plating. The impact echoed through the empty loading dock, followed by the hiss of a damaged power coupling venting coolant. He'd been 30 seconds from clocking out. James crossed the bay toward the wreckage. Cargo containers had scattered everywhere, some cracked open to spill data cores and medical supplies across the floor. A woman emerged from behind the overturned cart, tall, blue-skinned, with rose-colored hair pulled back in an intricate style. Her amber eyes blazed with frustration. 3 cycles without incident, she said, gesturing at the ruined cart. And now this. James knelt beside the cart, running his fingers along the damaged emitter housing. The metal was still hot. Power couplings cracked. The surge fried your primary emitters. She crouched beside him, close enough that he caught an unfamiliar scent, cinnamon and something electric. Her skin darkened to a deeper blue. Can it be repaired tonight? Not by protocol. This needs replacement parts in 12 hours minimum. James checked his chronometer. His shift had ended at 300. It was now 3:17. But I didn't say it couldn't be done. Her eyes searched his face. You could fix it? Maybe. I'll need to improvise. James stood and retrieved his tool case. And I'll need your help. They worked while the station's night cycle hummed around them. James pulled components from decommissioned equipment. A power regulator from a mining drone, emitter coils from an old cargo lifter. He showed her how to strip housings without damaging circuitry, their hands working in tandem. Your people don't do this, she said, watching him splice incompatible power systems together. Fix things? Improvise. Build solutions from broken pieces. She held the housing steady while he soldered connections. We replace broken components with identical components. Your approach is fascinating. He glanced at her and found her watching his hands with intensity that made his pulse quicken. She noticed him looking, and that darker flush returned, spreading down her neck. They didn't talk much after that, falling into a rhythm. She learned to hand him tools before he asked. When he needed to access the cart's undercarriage, she lay beside him on the cold deck, holding the work light steady. At 8:43, James activated the cart's power system. The emitters hummed to life and the cart rose smoothly. She pressed her palm to the hull, testing its stability. It works. For now, get proper replacement parts before your next run. James wiped grease from his hands. She studied him for a long moment, then began gathering her scattered cargo. Their fingers brushed as they both reached for the same container. The contact lasted a fraction of a second, but he felt it like static electricity. When the cargo was secured, she paused. My name is Kiva. James Heller. I won't forget this, James Heller. She guided the cart toward the departure corridor, and he watched until she disappeared. Then he gathered his tools and headed home to his empty apartment. The next morning, James was cataloging inventory when his workshop door chimed. Kiva stood in the entrance, wearing ceremonial purple fabric that shifted with her movement. In her hands, she carried an ornate thermal container. I told you, she said, stepping inside. My people take debt seriously. She opened the container, releasing steam that carried that cinnamon spice scent. She poured dark liquid into 2 small cups. This is Sarish, a morning beverage from my homeworld. We share it with those who've shown us kindness. James accepted the cup, feeling its warmth. The taste was complex, bitter and sweet, and something like drinking starlight. It's good. Kiva smiled, transforming her face. I have another delivery tomorrow morning. Perhaps I'll bring more then. She left before he could respond, and James stood holding an empty cup, wondering what had just happened. She came the next morning, and the morning after that. By the 5th day, James found himself watching the door at 7:30, his stomach tight with anticipation. The silences felt full rather than empty. He'd catch her watching him work, and when their eyes met, that darker blue flush would color her skin. On the 7th morning, she arrived late, slightly breathless, her hair disheveled. I'm sorry, cargo manifest errors. I thought I wouldn't make it. You didn't have to come, James said, hating how his voice betrayed his relief. Yes, Kiva said quietly, I did. She poured the tea with trembling hands. When James took his cup, his fingers closed over hers, holding them there. She went very still, her skin deepening to midnight blue. The workshop door exploded inward. 3 station security officers stormed in, weapons drawn. Kiva of the Seraphi merchant clan, you're detained on suspicion of smuggling restricted weapons components. There's been a mistake, Kiva said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. The lead officer held up a data pad displaying her cargo manifest, with entries highlighted in red. Military-grade plasma capacitors, weapon assembly cores, navigation jammers, all logged to your last 3 cargo runs. James felt her hand grip his arm. That's impossible. I carry commercial goods. Search her current shipment. 2 guards left. James looked at Kiva, searching her face. Her expression showed genuine shock, but beneath it, fear flickered. Tell me you didn't know, he said quietly. She met his eyes, and the vulnerability there hit him like a physical blow. I didn't, James, I swear. Contraband confirmed she's been running weapons. They pulled her away from him, binding her wrists with energy cuffs. She kept her eyes locked on his. James, please, I didn't know. Someone set me up. They led her toward the door. James stood frozen, the cup of tea still warm in his hand. As they disappeared, he looked down at the thermal container on his workbench. Then something nagged at him, a detail from that first night. James pulled up the maintenance logs on his workstation. He found the entry for Bay 7, the night Kiva's cart failed. The power coupling that failed had been inspected and certified 3 days before. No indication of where. The failure pattern suggested sudden catastrophic overload, not gradual deterioration. He pulled up security footage, watching the cart enter the bay at 247. At 3:12, the cart's power system spiked. James zoomed in frame by frame. Just before the spike, a figure in maintenance coveralls approached from the security camera's blind spot. The figure attached something to the cart's undercarriage, then disappeared. James felt ice settle in his chest. Someone had sabotaged Kiva's cart deliberately, forcing her to stay in the bay long enough for someone else to access her cargo. He grabbed the thermal container and made a decision that would either save her or condemn them both. James had 6 hours before Kiva's detention hearing transferred to sector authority. Getting involved meant risking his job and possibly his freedom for someone he'd known for 7 mornings. The smart play was walking away. James looked at the thermal container in his hands and started walking toward the detention level. He found Sarah Okafor in her cramped administrative office. I need to access the detention logs, he said. Sarah's eyes narrowed. That's sealed by security order. A courier was arrested on weapons charges. I think she was set up. James set the thermal container on her desk. I have 6 hours to prove it. Sarah studied him with an expression that had seen too many bad decisions. The evidence against her is substantial, James. Her cart was sabotaged. I pulled the logs and security footage. Someone forced her to stay in Bay 7 long enough to plant contraband. You have proof? Enough to create reasonable doubt, but I need to talk to her first. Sarah was quiet, fingers drumming against her desk. You know, this could cost me my job. I know. She sighed and entered something into her terminal. 20 minutes don't make me regret this. Kiva sat on a narrow bench in the detention cell, her courier's suit replaced with detention grays. When she saw James, she stood quickly, pressing her hands against the transparent barrier. You came. Tell me about your cargo procedures. How do you verify shipments? Hope flickered across her features. Every container is sealed by the shipper with a biometric lock keyed to my signature. I don't open them. That would void insurance and my courier certification. So you have no way of knowing what's actually inside? No, she paused. James, I swear I didn't know about the weapons. I believe you. Relief flooded her face. Someone sabotaged your cart 6 nights ago, forced you to stay in Bay 7 long enough to plant contraband. James pulled up the security footage on his data pad. Watch this figure approach your cart right before your power coupling fails. Kiva leaned close to the barrier, studying the image. I can't see their face. But look at their access badge. That's station security, not maintenance. So someone in security disabled my cart, planted weapons, then raided my shipment to make it look legitimate. Her skin darkened to midnight blue. But why me? Maybe you weren't specific. Maybe you were just convenient. James pulled up station cargo records. I checked other detention logs. 4 other couriers arrested on similar charges in the past month. All had mechanical failures in Bay 7, all within a 3-hour window of scheduled arrivals. Kiva's eyes widened. Someone's using us as cover for weapons smuggling. And when security raids the shipments, it looks like they're doing their jobs. James met her gaze through the barrier. But I think someone in security is running the operation and using these arrests to eliminate competition. Can you prove it? Not yet, but I know where to look. James checked his chronometer. 5 hours. I'm going to find evidence that clears you. Kiva pressed both palms against the barrier, and James matched the gesture from his side, their hands separated by centimeters. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. James thought about 7 mornings of tea, the first time in a year he hadn't just been going through motions. Because when they took you away, I realized I wanted more than 7 mornings, he said. And because I don't think you're a smuggler. Her skin deepened further, spreading down her neck and across her shoulders. When this is over, you can bring me tea for as long as you want. James pulled out his data pad. Now tell me everything about your cargo pickups. They talked quickly, Kiva recalling her last dozen runs. A pattern emerged. All flagged shipments originated from Meridian Freight Services. The pickup location was always Bay 7. The processing officer was always Deputy Security Chief Vincent Carrick. I need to access your cargo records, the original manifests, and biometric seal data. They're in my ship's computer, but security impounded my vessel. Where? Confiscation hangar, Section F. She paused. James, that area is restricted. Then I'll be careful, he stood. The guard shift changes in 15 minutes. Kiva called his name as he turned to leave. Be careful. The confiscation hangar occupied a low-traffic section of the industrial ring. James accessed it through a maintenance corridor, bypassing the main checkpoint. Kiva's ship was small, built for speed, with scorch marks from atmospheric entries. James approached the sealed access ramp and went to work on the security lock with his multi-tool, bypassing the primary circuit. The ramp descended with a hydraulic hiss. Inside, the ship reflected its pilot, efficient, organized, with worn personal touches. Photos Mag sealed to the bulkhead showed Kiva with other Seraphi. James moved to the command console and connected his data pad, running a bypass script. The computer unlocked. James pulled up the cargo manifest database, cross-referencing original shipping orders with what had been found in her cargo. The discrepancies were obvious. Original manifests showed legitimate commercial goods, but someone had accessed the database after each shipment was loaded and added entries for restricted items. The timestamps showed modifications happened during transit, while Kiva would have been unable to verify her cargo. James downloaded everything to his datapad, including biometric seal data. You're persistent, I'll give you that. James spun toward the voice. Deputy Security Chief Vincent Carrick stood at the access ramp, flanked by 2 armed officers. His expression was almost friendly, which made it worse. Breaking into an impounded vessel, tampering with evidence. Vincent shook his head. You're making this very easy for me, Heller. James's hand moved toward the datapad's emergency wipe function, but Vincent stopped him. Don't. My people will just retrieve it from your corpse. You're running the weapons, James said, buying time. Using couriers to move contraband, then arresting them to cover your operation. It's a solid business model. I move product for interested parties, take a percentage, and my teams look effective busting smugglers. Vincent shrugged. Everyone wins. Except the couriers whose lives you destroy. Acceptable losses. Vincent gestured to his officers. Escort Mr. Heller to holding. The officers moved forward. James made his decision. He couldn't outfight them, But he knew this station better than anyone. He slammed his hand on the console, triggering the ship's emergency purge sequence. Alarms shrieked as the hangar's atmosphere vents activated. In the chaos, James dove past the officers and rolled under Kiva's ship, scrambling toward the maintenance access. He heard shouts, then the sharp crack of a stun weapon. Pain lanced through his shoulder, but adrenaline kept him moving. He reached the maintenance hatch and threw himself through, sealing it behind him. The corridor beyond led deeper into the industrial sections, his territory. James ran, his shoulder throbbing, clutching the datapad. Behind him, Vincent's voice echoed. "Lock down Section F. No one leaves the industrial ring." James ducked into a service junction. Vincent had tagged him as a threat, which meant he'd be monitoring communications. Calling for help would just lead security to anyone who tried to assist. He was on his own, with evidence that could clear Kiva, but no way to deliver it. James checked his chronometer, 3 hours left. He thought about Kiva in her cell, about the way her skin deepened when she looked at him, about 7 mornings that felt like the beginning of something real. Then he thought about the maintenance tunnels beneath the entire station. Passages security rarely patrolled because they were too narrow, too hot, too easy to get lost in. Unless you'd spent years maintaining them. James found the nearest tunnel access and descended into the station's underlayers. Down here he had advantages. Down here he could move unseen. And down here he started forming a plan. The maintenance tunnels beneath Threshold were never meant for human habitation. James crawled through passages barely wider than his shoulders, heat from environmental recyclers making the air thick. Sweat stung his eyes and his injured shoulder screamed protest, but he kept going. He needed to reach the central data hub to upload his evidence and broadcast it before Vincent could suppress it. But the hub was in Section C, 3 levels up and half a kilometer across hostile territory. James paused at an intersection, consulting his mental map. He could hear boots above, security teams searching. Vincent's voice crackled over the security channel James had spliced into. "Check every maintenance access. He's got to surface eventually." James chose the left passage and kept moving. 20 minutes later, he emerged into a service junction in Section B behind a storage facility. He checked his chronometer, 2 hours remaining. He accessed a wall terminal and pulled up the station schematic, looking for the fastest route to the data hub. Every direct path would take him through areas Vincent would have covered. But there was one route, through the cargo processing center, mostly automated during the current shift. James started moving, staying in shadows, using his knowledge of security camera blind spots. He was 50 meters from the processing center when he heard footsteps from both directions. Trapped, he spotted a cargo container on a transport dolly and climbed inside, pulling the lid nearly closed. Through the gap, he watched 2 security officers meet outside his hiding spot. "Nothing. Carrick wants him found before the courier transfers. Says Heller's got evidence that could compromise the operation." The officers moved on. James waited until their footsteps faded before climbing out. He'd stumbled into something bigger than one framed courier. If Vincent was worried about sector command, the smuggling operation had reached beyond Threshold. James reached the processing center and slipped inside. The vast space was filled with cargo containers being sorted by robotic arms. He was halfway across when alarms started blaring. Security doors began descending throughout the facility. James broke into a run, diving under the nearest door just as it slammed shut. Vincent's voice echoed through speakers. "Heller, I know you're in there. The facility's locked down. You're not getting out." James moved between cargo containers looking for maintenance access. Vincent had herded him into a controlled space with limited exits. "In 45 minutes, the courier transfers to sector custody," Vincent continued. "Her case gets buried, she disappears, and life goes on. You can't stop that. But you can save yourself. Give me the datapad and I'll make sure you walk away." James found an emergency access shaft built into the facility's infrastructure. It led down, but down meant the maintenance sublevel, and that meant options. He was prying open the access panel when the lights cut out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. James heard the main doors opening, followed by footsteps. Last chance, Heller. James dropped into the access shaft, landing hard in darkness. His shoulder erupted in fresh agony. He forced himself to move, feeling along the tunnel wall until he found a ladder. Up or down? Down meant safety. Up meant pushing toward the data hub, toward evidence that could save Kiva, but would almost certainly get him caught. James started climbing up. The ladder emerged in a crawl space running parallel to Section B's main concourse. Through ventilation grills, James could see people moving normally, unaware of the hunt in the station's hidden spaces. He followed the crawl space, his body protesting every movement. 90 minutes remaining when he reached the access point nearest the data hub. One problem: the hub was in the administrative center, which meant security checkpoints he couldn't bypass. Unless he didn't go through them at all. James studied the schematic. The data hub occupied the third floor. He was on the sublevel, which meant climbing 15 meters through spaces not designed for vertical access. But there was the environmental shaft. Every station section had a main environmental shaft running the full height, carrying ventilation, power conduits, and data cables. They were accessible only through locked maintenance hatches and definitely not rated for climbing. James found the nearest hatch and overrode the lock. Heat blasted out, carrying the smell of recycled air. He looked up into a vertical tunnel disappearing into darkness above, lit only by service lights every 5 meters. The cable bundles along the shaft walls would have to serve as handholds. James secured the data pad inside his shirt, tested the nearest cable bundle, and started climbing. The cables were slick with condensation, and his injured shoulder made every pull upward agony. Twice he slipped, catching himself at the last second. Below, the maintenance hatch opened again. A flashlight beam swept upward. He's in the environmental shaft, heading up toward admin. James abandoned stealth and climbed faster. The shaft seemed endless, his muscles burning. He passed level 2, then 3. The data hub's access junction should be ahead. He reached the junction and kicked open the maintenance panel, tumbling into the corridor beyond. He landed 10 meters from the data hub's entrance. Security personnel turned toward him, hands moving to weapons. James sprinted for the hub's door, using his maintenance override. He stumbled inside and sealed the door, buying maybe 30 seconds before they breached. The hub's terminal glowed in the dim room. James pulled out his data pad with shaking hands and connected it to the upload port. Progress bar, 5%. Boots thundered outside. Someone started cutting through the door with a plasma torch. 10%. James looked for anything to barricade the door. Nothing. 20%. The door glowed red where the torch cut through. 30%. He thought about Kiva counting down her final minutes before transfer. About 7 mornings and all the mornings they'd never have if he failed. 50%. The cutting stopped. Vincent's voice came through the damaged door. Heller, uploading that data won't save her. I'll have it scrubbed before it reaches anyone who matters. 70%. Maybe, James called back. Or maybe someone in Sector Command has been wondering why Threshold has such impressive interdiction numbers. 85%. You're betting your life on maybe. 90%. The door exploded inward. Security personnel poured through. James raised his hands, stepping away from the terminal. The progress bar read 97%. Vincent entered last, disappointment rather than anger on his face. He looked at the terminal, then at James. Brave but stupid. 100%. Upload complete. Vincent saw it, eyes narrowing. He pulled his sidearm, aiming at James's chest. Doesn't matter, I'll scrub it. You can try, James said. But I didn't just upload to the station network. I routed it through Kiva's ship's communication array and sent copies to 3 different sector command offices. That data is already out of your reach. Vincent's professional mask cracked, fury bleeding through. Then you've signed both your death warrants. He pulled the trigger. James twisted, but pain exploded through his side as the plasma bolt caught him. He fell, vision tunneling. Through the haze, he saw Vincent turning toward the terminal, desperately trying to recall the data. Then new alarms started blaring, not security alerts but priority command overrides. Vincent froze as his communicator erupted with voices demanding his immediate presence in the command center. "Sir, Sector Command is on emergency channel," one officer said. "They're demanding to speak with you about flagged intelligence reports." Vincent looked at James clutching his side, blood seeping between his fingers. Murder flickered in his eyes. Then calculation replaced it. "Get medical here and seal this area." He stormed from the data hub. One of the officers knelt beside James and started applying pressure to the wound. "Med team's coming, just hang on." James tried to focus through the pain. "Kiva, the courier. Her transfer's been delayed pending investigation," the officer said quietly. "Sir, whatever you did, Sector Command just put a hold on all detention transfers and launched a formal audit of station security." James let his head fall back, relief flooding through him. The data had reached the right people. Kiva was safe. He closed his eyes and let darkness take him. James woke in the medical bay with synthetic skin sealing the plasma burn on his side. His chronometer showed 4 hours had passed. He tried to sit up and found light restraints on his wrists. A Sector Command officer sat beside his bed, reviewing a datapad. She looked up when James moved. "Mr. Heller, I'm Commander Patricia Wells, Sector Investigations. You've had an interesting day." "Is Kiva safe?" "Released an hour ago. All charges dropped. Your evidence was comprehensive. We've been aware of irregularities in Threshold's security operations, but couldn't pinpoint the source. You handed us everything we needed to dismantle a smuggling operation spanning 4 stations." "Vincent Carrick?" "In custody, along with 8 other personnel." Wells set down her pad. "Which brings us to you. You broke approximately 17 station regulations, hacked secured systems, stole classified data, and generally caused chaos. I should have you arrested." James waited. "However, you also exposed major corruption and saved an innocent woman. Sector Command views your actions as those of a concerned citizen rather than a criminal. Your record will show a formal reprimand, but no charges." She stood straightening her uniform. "You're free to go once medical clears you. I'd suggest keeping a lower profile going forward." After Wells left, James lay trying to process everything. His body ached, his career was probably damaged, and he'd nearly died multiple times. But Kiva was safe. That was what mattered. The door opened and Kiva entered. She'd changed into a simple flight suit that looked elegant on her frame. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and her skin showed that deep midnight blue. "James." His name was barely a whisper. She crossed to the bed in 3 strides and took his hand, careful of the medical sensors. "They told me what you did, how you risked everything." Her voice broke slightly. "I don't understand why." "Yes, you do," James said quietly. Kiva's eyes searched his face, and he watched truth settle over her features. She leaned down slowly, giving him time to pull away, and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, tentative, carrying weeks of restrained wanting. When she pulled back, her skin had deepened to a shade almost purple. "In my culture, when someone risks their life for another, it creates a bond called keshva, soul binding. It means your well-being becomes as important as my own." "I like the sound of that," James said. She smiled, but it faded. "There's something you need to know. During detention, I had time to think about my life. I've spent years in transit, never staying anywhere long enough to build real connections. I told myself it was professional dedication, but really it was fear of needing someone, of being vulnerable. And now I've realized some things are worth being afraid for." She squeezed his hand. "Sector Command offered me a position here on Threshold, coordinating courier operations for their investigation. I'd have a permanent berth, regular routes, a reason to stay." James felt his heart rate spike, and the medical sensors beeped in response. "Would you want that, staying here?" "That depends on whether a certain mechanic might want company for more than 7 mornings." Before James could answer, a doctor entered. "Mr. Heller, your readings just—" He stopped, taking in the scene. "Oh, well, elevated heart rate is understandable. I'll give you 2 some privacy." He left with a knowing smile. Kiva stepped back, a flush darkening her cheeks. Silence filled the medical bay. James looked at her, at the hope and vulnerability in her expression, and made a decision that felt easier than breathing. "I want all the mornings," he said. "Not just 7, not just 70. All of them, for as long as you're willing to bring tea to a mechanic who can't stay out of trouble." Kiva's smile transformed her entire face. "I think I can manage that." She kissed him again, deeper this time. And James forgot about his injuries, about the chaos, about everything except the woman in his arms and the future suddenly unfurling before them. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Kiva rested her forehead against his. "The doctors said you need another day of observation before discharge." "I'm not going anywhere," James said. "Good, because I brought tea." She reached into the bag she'd set by the door and pulled out the familiar thermal container. "I thought we could continue our morning ritual, even in less than ideal circumstances." She poured 2 cups, the steam carrying that cinnamon spice scent that had become so familiar. They drank in comfortable silence, Kiva perched on the edge of his medical bed, their free hands intertwined. "I spoke with station administration while you were unconscious," Kiva said, "about housing arrangements for my new position. They offered me temporary quarters in the residential sector." "Or," James prompted, hearing the unspoken question. "Or I could find alternative arrangements." She met his eyes. "Your apartment is probably small." "Meant for one person," James admitted, "but I think we could make it work if you wanted to." "This is fast," Kiva said, "possibly crazy." "Definitely crazy," James agreed. "But the last few days have taught me that sometimes the crazy choice is the right one." Kiva laughed, the sound filling the medical bay with warmth. "Then I suppose I should warn you. I'm a terrible roommate. I leave tea containers everywhere, and I have very specific temperature preferences. I fix environmental systems for a living. I think I can handle your temperature preferences." They finished their tea, and Kiva settled into the chair beside his bed, refusing to leave, despite the late hour. James dozed on and off, always waking to find her there, sometimes reading on her data pad, sometimes simply watching him with an expression that made his chest tight. The next morning, medical cleared him for discharge with strict instructions about rest and follow-up appointments. Kiva helped him dress, her hands gentle on his injured side, and they made their way slowly through the station toward his apartment. Word of Vincent's arrest and James's role had spread further. People nodded as they passed, some with respect, others with curiosity. James found he didn't mind as much with Kiva beside him. They reached his apartment, and James opened the door to his small world. Kiva moved through the space, examining everything with the care of someone preparing to make it home. "It's perfect," she said, turning to face him. "It's tiny." "It's ours," she corrected, "if you'll have me." James crossed to her and pulled her close, mindful of his healing side. "For as long as you want to stay." They spent the day in comfortable domesticity, Kiva retrieving her personal effects from her ship, James showing her how the apartment's various systems worked, both of them learning to navigate the same space. It felt natural in a way James hadn't expected, like pieces fitting together that he hadn't known were incomplete. That evening, they sat by the viewport watching ships depart, Kiva's head resting against his shoulder. "I never thanked you properly," she said quietly, "for believing me, for risking everything." "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do. In my culture, Keshva is sacred. It means I'm bound to you, James, not out of obligation, but out of choice, out of love." James turned to look at her, seeing the truth in her eyes, the way her skin deepened to that midnight blue. "Love?" he asked, his heart hammering. "Is that too fast? Too much?" Uncertainty crept into her voice. "No," James said, cupping her face in his hands. "It's exactly right." He kissed her, pouring everything he couldn't say into the contact, gratitude and desire, and the terrifying relief of finding someone who fit into the spaces he'd forgotten existed. Kiva responded with matching intensity, her hands sliding into his hair, her body pressing against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, James rested his forehead against hers. "I love you too," he said, in case that wasn't clear. Kiva laughed, the sound bright and joyful. It was moderately clear, but hearing it doesn't hurt. They stayed by the viewport as the station cycled into night, content in each other's presence. Eventually, exhaustion from the day's activities caught up with James, and Kiva guided him to bed, settling beside him with natural ease. "Sleep," she murmured, her fingers tracing gentle patterns on his chest. "I'll be here when you wake." James closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of her body against his, hearing the steady rhythm of her breathing. For the first time in longer than he could remember, his apartment didn't feel empty. It felt like home. James woke to sunlight filtering through the viewport and the smell of Suresh brewing. He sat up carefully, his side tender but manageable, and found Kiva moving through his tiny kitchen with practiced efficiency. She'd claimed his spare shirt, the fabric hanging loose on her frame, her hair loose and catching the light. She looked up when she heard him move, and her smile was soft and intimate. "Good morning." "Morning," James said, his voice rough with sleep. "You're up early." "Old habits. Courier schedules don't allow for sleeping in." She poured tea into 2 cups and brought them to the bed, settling cross-legged beside him. "But I'm learning to appreciate slower mornings." They drank in comfortable silence, steam rising between them, the station waking up around them. It felt like a continuation of their ritual, transformed by the intimacy of shared space and shared nights. "I start my new position tomorrow," Kiva said, "coordinating with Sector Command on the investigation, establishing new security protocols for courier operations. It's going to be strange, staying in one place." "Strange bad or strange good?" She set down her cup and took his hand. "Strange wonderful. I spent years convincing myself that constant movement was freedom, but this, you, us, having a place to come home to, this is what freedom actually feels like." James squeezed her fingers, understanding exactly what she meant. He'd spent the past year in the same place, doing the same work, and called it stability. But stability without connection was just stagnation. This was different. This was building something. "I should probably warn you," he said. "My work schedule is erratic. Emergency repairs happen at all hours."